Hi, I'm Bharat Sahani and welcome to another episode of TekTalks. TekTalks is a platform where we invite South Australian business leaders to talk about their life, their journey, and how technology has impacted them and their clients in a positive way. Today we have someone who is playing vivid roles in her life. She is a CEO, a mentor, a mother, an exceptional cook, and clearly a role model for many. From fundraising and marketing to being CEO of SA Little Athletics, she has excelled in all. I admire her vision and exceptional leadership skills. I would like to welcome Sue Bowman. Hello, Sue. Welcome to our show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
I must say that it is a great pleasure to have you on our show because you're the first woman business leader that we have invited in this series. And what I've seen specifically in South Australia, that it has been an inspiration where I've seen very few women who are leading this market from the front, and playing a role of a CEO obviously is a challenging task. But before we jump into your current role, I have a question where I'll ask you about how your experience have been working for 20 years in the not-for-profit sector and how that has shaped your career.
Well, it probably takes me back a little bit further than that. When I was very young, my father worked in the not-for-profit sector. He worked in finance, and he was very instrumental in having my sister and I work in our school holidays and give back to the community and learn a little bit about, there's a lot more out in life that we need to appreciate and we need to look after. So I grew up with it, really. So when it came time for me to sort of carve a career for myself, I was quite an entrepreneur as a young kid and a young adult, and I wanted, I wanted businesses and I wanted all these things. But the not-for-profit world kept drawing me closer and closer and closer, and I fell into it by accident, to be really honest. I had a friend who worked for Novita Children's Services, which back then was a different name. And she asked me to come along and help do some stuff in the fundraising area. And I went, oh yeah, I can do that. And I was there 12 years and I built a fundraising empire for them that ended up turning over quite a few $1 million over that time. And I guess that sort of led me to realise that I actually had some ability I didn't really know that I had, and that I was actually quite good at it. And I made a lot of mistakes along the way. I mean, I was young and I, tried to lead a group of staff, and I found that very difficult. And I also found it very challenging having bosses and people telling me what to do, because I was always a very headstrong young individual. So that had also had its challenges, and because I had my ideas and I kind of always thought that I was right, and a lot of the time I wasn't always right. But that's a lesson I think we get in life, is that when we're young we think we know better, and then you learn through life, and sometimes you learn through a bit of a, that's not the way it's going to be. But overall that was really great. Went from there, and in that time also had 3 children, and so I was trying to raise my children and also have a career, and that has its challenges as a mum, because you do tend to have to still be home and play and feed your children and look after them. So that was tough, but I got through it, and my kids grew up, and the one thing that I always thought was, I'm going to do with my kids what my dad did with me, and I'm going to teach them to give back to the community, and I'm going to teach them to be giving as well, because it's served me well. And I'm proud to say that my kids to this day all volunteer and all work in community areas in their areas of passion, which is whether it's in sport or whatever else they do. So I do feel that we have a bit of a family legacy in that space. But I also had a philosophy that I wanted to make sure that when I went into working with young people and staff that I didn't want it to be a rigid environment. I wanted to be an open and inviting environment. I didn't want to be the dictator. I wanted to be, I wanted to build a sort of a team. And I think I've been quite successful with that. It has had its challenges because sometimes you get a young one that comes in and they sort of surge ahead and you sometimes have to clip their wings a little bit, but that does happen. Yeah, and then sort of evolved from there and moved on to other areas of business. And so I've kind of stayed in the not-for-profit sector. I don't think I've ever gone out of it since that time. Yeah.
Probably because you've figured it out that not-for-profit is the area where you have got your niche, and this is the area where you think you can excel. But one of the key lessons that I'm getting from you, obviously I'm not as much experienced entrepreneur as you are, but I've been watching a lot of videos online and the tips from the successful entrepreneurs. And one of the key attributes that all the entrepreneurs emphasize on that you should find something to be passionate about.
Absolutely.
You should find something that you absolutely love. Although you are a not-for-profit, but you're passionate about it. But most of the times I've seen few of the entrepreneurs, when we ask them why you're trying to do this business or why you're trying to achieve this, the answer that we normally get is like, oh, because I want to be rich or I want to make money.
Yeah.
And you are a classic example where it clearly is that you can follow your passion, you can be a successful entrepreneur. And it has to be about money, although we know that money is part of it. Money needs to be there for the business, but if you're focusing to be an entrepreneur just to be rich and to make money and to run a successful business out of it, I think you've got your route wrong.
Well, probably the not-for-profit sector is not for those people.
Absolutely.
I would say so. Look, it's important to all of us to be successful, but putting a benchmark on earning income as your key goal and your key criteria, I think it would leave you to be a very miserable and very unhappy person in your career, because money doesn't make people happy.
Yeah. Neither it makes it you feel satisfied when
you know, it's a quick fix, and it's an electric high when you earn, you know, big masses of money, but to work in the not-for-profit sector, you kind of need to want that for the sector you're working in and not for yourself.
Absolutely.
That's kind of the difference, I think.
That is where the passion comes in. You're passionate about not-for-profit sector. You want that to grow. You want people to learn how it is good to give back to community, and you follow that lead by letting your kids know that how important it is to give it back to the community, to do some charity work, and that is what I believe is the root of what makes you successful in not-for-profit sector.
Yeah.
So, an interesting thing that I noticed about your career is your association with Australian Paralympics. Can you please walk us through that journey and if there is any example or any incident that you would like to share from that which has inspired you?
Oh gosh, that was probably apart from what I'm doing at the moment, it was probably the biggest passion of my whole career path. I was employed as a state manager for the organisation. I had really not worked in sport before. I'd come from, I guess, the charity side of the not-for-profit. So going into sport for me was different, but it still had that feeling of being able to help people that had disabilities. Well, I went in thinking I was helping people with disabilities. They got more abilities than what we have. But at the time, my heart was very excited about doing that role. The role grew very quickly, and my role personally grew to evolve into me being a state manager and also covering a national role as the national fundraising and marketing sponsorship person. So that was amazing, because I was still had my kids, but they weren't as young. They were a little bit more self-sufficient, and I had to sort of commute a lot to Sydney and come back and then be mum and work and manage the state office, and then I'd have my staff look after the state office, and then off I'd go to Sydney and I'd have staff in Sydney, and it was just full on. But I never for 1 second disliked what I did. I loved what I did because I knew that what I was doing was bringing in a lot of needed funds for our athletes to go away to Paralympic Games. And the Paralympics wasn't that well known back then, and now look at it, it's Paralympics Australia, it's doing so well. They've got some inspiring and amazing athletes, and I learned so much from that. I learned so much from them, because I used to always feel like, oh, those poor kids, here they are, they're trying so hard. Boy, oh boy, I was so wrong. They're more committed than the average athlete that aspires for Olympic success. They are humble, they're committed, they've got a drive and a passion for doing what they're doing, and they'll try and overcome anything. So you kind of become a little bit in love with that whole thing, because you become part of something that is so inspiring. And to have actually gone over to a Games and actually been part of that whole process, I actually got to go to London, and they delivered the best Olympics and Paralympics out there. And to go out and be part of that and be in the hype and the vibe and know that I'd actually contributed to that, I'd actually helped that team achieve its success to get there. It was amazing.
It is so inspiring, isn't it?
Yeah.
I believe that we perform to our best capabilities only when we are pushed against the wall. And this is a classic example.
That's exactly right.
When the people with special needs or disabilities know that they have nothing to lose, and they give their, probably more than 100%. And that is what I think you were able to see there, that how committed they were than a regular athlete who probably don't have any disability at all.
If you really look at every single human being out there, if you really wanted to have a look at it, every single one of us has got some form of a disability. Somewhere in our body, we're not perfect. So, we might have a slight vision impairment, or we might have a slight hearing impairment, or we might have a problem with our back, or, everybody's got something. So why do we isolate those people? Why do we make it such a difficult journey for that group of people? And the one thing I learned is not about disability, it's about ability, because they are about ability. They are out to prove to the world that they've got more gusto and more drive and more willingness to overcome adversity, and it's a good trait, and it's a very positive environment to work in.
I think you've articulated it really well. It's not about disability, it's about the ability, and
That's
that
right.
is really important or significant
Absolutely.
in everyone's career. Cool. As a business leader, what do you think that the skills you look into for a potential employee other than just the domain knowledge?
Oh, that's a toughie. Sometimes you think you're right and you're not. One thing about coming to working in Little Athletics, I came from a corporate sort of environment in sport, and then I came into a grassroots environment, which was about community, and it was about our clubs and our centres and our members and the young athletes and the mums and the dads and the grandparents, and it was about all of that, and it was really about community. So I spoke to our board and I said, I really want to make sure that we look like, as an organisation, that we're encouraging young people to come in, whether they're straight out of uni or they're trainees out of school. I want us to be a teaching and learning organisation, because I want us to bring these people through a process rather than try and always employ these highly qualified people into an organisation that is about grassroots, because then we could teach those staff about the values of looking after our community, and we could work with them to actually evolve into a caring and organisation that gives back to our community, because we exist because of our membership, we exist because of our clubs, and we need to make sure that we are servicing them properly, and it's been quite a challenging journey, because sometimes with young people they have a very different idea about what they think working is, and we've had some really big wins and we've had some losses, and you just have to bear with that. I can't. I value my staff so high.
Absolutely.
They are just, and you've met them, Bharat, they are just an incredible group of young people that are so committed and so passionate about what they do, and they're very fiercely loyal to the organisation. And I guess our board needs to be given credit for allowing that. They could have wanted us to have some very high profile, people that work in sport, but we've chosen to go a different journey. And I think it's a legacy that maybe I can leave them, is that we've done something that's valuing our young people and also our community.
Absolutely, that's one of the key attributes of entrepreneurship is being a mentor, and you clearly excel in that. I have personally met the staff that work under you, and the commitment that they show in achieving what they want is incredible. And the most important thing that I've noticed there is that the staff are learning the key lessons or the skills that they need to excel in the market. They are quite young. I think most of your staff is around the age of 19 to 23, 24, and they're very skilled and passionate about what they do. So I think that's a really good legacy to leave behind, and hopefully other organizations can learn, other boards can also learn from this example, where we need to work with the young scales or young generation which are coming in the Australian market.
There's a real fear amongst, I guess, the more senior part of our workforce. There's an absolute fear about having young people come in and change, how we've always done it. People always seem to say they don't like change because this is how we've always done something. I've learned so much from my staff, and I've learned so much, and they've learned so much from me. We should never fear, ever fear employing young people, because they're vibrant. They're going to make mistakes, but if you're a good leader, you don't give them enough to ruin an organisation. You're going to teach them to make those mistakes, but to be honest about what they've done rather than try and cover those things up. But on a whole, we've done very well, and they've done very well. And I'm not who I am today because without them, we are a team.
Absolutely, it's all about team and teamwork, and a leader is as good as its team members are, isn't it? Right. Now we'll move into the technology section.
Oh, the fun bit for me.
So over the last 20 years, technology has changed significantly. It has
dramatically.
It has impacted us in our professional life, in our personal life, the way we interact, the way we communicate. How do you feel technology has impacted the businesses in your era, and how that has positively enabled certain businesses to grow?
It's slapped us in the face, and that there's no other way to say it. Coming from, I guess, my era, where there was CRMs and databases and all of those sorts of things that just weren't even. There was just nothing of the sort. You had, everything was paper. Everything you did was, triplicate. Everything we used to print. When I first came into the Little Athletics organisation, my predecessor was, they used to call her the mother hen of Little Athletics. She'd been there for 30 years, but her model of delivery for the sport, God love her, she did a great job. But her model of delivery was everything in triplicate. Everything was in paper. And I had compactors and filing systems, and there was just piles and piles of trees in front of me in paper. And I sat back and I thought, no, there's got to be a better way than this. This is just ridiculous. Like, it was just too much for me. And I had to really then sit back and go, okay, I've come really into an organisation that hasn't embraced any technology apart from maybe an email system and a half sort of hashed up filing system electronically. So I really had to get on my back foot because I'm no expert in technology, and you know that. So I thought, well, how do I do this? Where do we move to from here, and what can we do to make things better? So we started to sort of work with our counterparts in other states who pretty much ran very similar sorts of operations to us. And we looked at, we needed to start doing an online registration system. Well, that's not as easy as it sounds either, because then you've got to train people to do it. But we didn't have to just train us to do it. We had to train our staff, and then we had to train our clubs to do that. Nationally, we ran training workshops, and I sat there and I was just like, this is just not my gig, you know. Like, I was just so out of my depth with all of this stuff, and you're just so unprepared for what's in front of you. So there's challenges financially with that. There's challenges with teaching and making sure you've got the right sort of software that's going to support your business. And it just was overwhelming. It really was. And I mean, in 5 years or 6 years that I've been here now, we've gone from paper to where we are today. And yes, we're still making a few boo-boos and a few mistakes with it, but we're actually sort of feeling like now we can start. I'm getting excited now because I can see that if I want to, pluck out, some history or some data on some bits and pieces for different age groups or where our trends are going and start looking at some analysis, I can actually it helps me then to make decisions or take this stuff to our board and say to the board, this is where we're lacking, this is where we're moving forward, because you couldn't do that with paper. But now we've got these wonderful things called graphs, and, as long as you've got the right people being able to pull all of that analysis together. And the process for our members is a lot easier. And our clubs are loving it because it's instant for them. The online banking systems are easy. So all of that technology has dramatically come into effect over 6 years for us. So we've never sort of sat back and gone, gee, okay, now we're ready to go, because every time we think we're okay, we think, oh, we've got to do this now. And it kind of evolves. So very unprepared for it, but certainly are very relieved that we're sort of on our way.
And I think there's a key learning to take out from here that previously, when technology was not that utilized in an organization, most of the data was on papers, and it was very difficult to capture that data all together and do the quantitative analysis and make business decisions out of it, which is what a key learning we can take out from this answer. An example of, I was with one of our clients yesterday, and after running the program through the clients, the outcome was we have to hand them over a feedback form of 15 questions out in there, and there were like 2 or 3 forms like that. So once it was done with the clients were not happy with how much paperwork they had to go through. And when I reached back to the main branch, I asked them, like, why is it are we still using the papers? And you'd be surprised that somewhere up down the ladder in that department in some other state, I can't name these, but the reason why all this paper was happening, because all they want was an answer of yes and no. So there were like 20, 30, 40 questions going on, and the outcome of that was just yes and no. And clearly, if we could have understood what the requirements were, built an IT system around those business requirements, then the end customers didn't have to go through that experience of filling out that paperwork. So look how important technology can be if implemented in the right way, and can harness that so that your customers can have a pleasant experience. Plus, obviously, it will be much more environmental when you're not printing out papers.
And that's true, but it's also true in respect to your front end customer service stuff, where you are taking in, like we take membership for the sport. We want to make sure that experience is not equally as distressing as filling out a whole lot of paperwork. So we need to be very careful, and I think that's probably one thing we've learned, and probably working with you, is that maybe our process was maybe a little bit too cumbersome for families, and do we really need all this information, and are we just making this process way too difficult for them? And I think when we look at it, we probably say yes, because ideally we just, I mean, for the protection of children, there is certain details that we do need. We do need, you know, the contact details, and we do need all those things, because we have to do that, because we have, you know, we have to protect.
Compliance to meet.
Absolutely. We've got so many compliance measures that we have to fit, but it's important. That process is important, that we make sure that the customer experience on that as well is equally is not as hard as what the paper process was.
Yeah, absolutely. I think at this point of time, when we are trying to use the technology in the way we want, we also are binded by different regulations, which probably can disrupt the customer experience that they are going through.
That's right.
But clearly, hopefully in future, that can be understood more correctly, can be discussed with the higher authorities why we are doing it, and if we have a simple way to manage that, can we please implement that? But obviously we understand that that is up for discussion and has to go through lots of channels.
I think for Australia in itself, I think we're a little bit behind the rest of the world a little bit in technology. I think it's kind of, there is a few gurus out there that know what they're doing, but really a lot of us are really just learning now. And we're learning how important it is. So it's almost like everybody's trying to catch up, and everyone's trying to work out how this works. And it's hard for us, because we haven't had to, we haven't been learning a lot of this stuff coming through. You see kids now coming through schools, and you know, they come in and all of a sudden they know stuff, you know. So thankfully the technology and things are starting to come through, and they're learning that at an early age. But I think Australia has struggled a bit with embracing technology, and that's just my personal opinion, but I think we're learning more from the rest of the world than what we are internally.
Good. I think it was really nice talking to you, Sue. You have answered a few of the questions absolutely marvelously, and there are a few key points that I would like to summarize in this. The first and the foremost is, if you're an entrepreneur, you must figure out what is the passion that you want to follow. If you're an entrepreneur, you should always concentrate on the things that can make a difference, and the things that you absolutely love to do, even if you have to do it 15, 18, 20 hours a day. If you are an entrepreneur and you are thinking about money, then you are in the wrong business.
Definitely.
Also, one of the things in terms of technology that we just figured out is that technology is important, and over a period of time, it is really significant that we adopt the technology and change with the time. If we leave it for too late, then it could become the bottleneck to grow in your organization, and even to do your day-to-day business and serve your customers effectively.
It could destroy your organization.
It could destroy the organization.
That's right. Yeah.
Well, it was absolutely loving talking to you, Sue. Thank you very much for coming on the show. I really appreciate that you take out your precious time and had a good few minutes chat with us.
It's my pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.